Audiophiles of the internet, my name is Adriana and today I'm here to bring you my August wrap-up. August was a really great reading month and two things dominated in August, and the first one is manga, duh, and the second is fantasy. Another duh. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I finished in August was The Crown of Embers by Rae Carson, which is the second book in the Girl of Fire and Thorns trilogy. This series revolves around a main character named Elisa Lucero, and she is a bearer of the God Stone. This is a very sacred gem that is connected to her body, and it is believed to be bestowed at birth by God himself. Her God Stone is never safe, not from assassins, not from thieves, and not from people who mean to do her and her country harm. And she also hears rumors about there being a greater source of power out there, and she might need to find it in order to save her country. To myself, at least, I refer to the second book in this series as the Book of Feels. Holy crap. Character development, relationship development, OTP, the ship sailing strong. I just realized there's actually a ship, like with sails and stuff, in the book. Puns. So I love this book. I thought it was a great addition to the series and continuation of the story, and I was fully engaged throughout the entire thing. So I gave The Crown of Embers 4.5 out of 5 stars, and it was an amazing read. I did finish the series with The Bitter Kingdom, also by Rae Carson. And I talk more about my thoughts on that one in my Bout of Books 11.0 wrap-up, so that will be linked down below. Strong, complex characters, amazing, enticing plots, fantastic themes. I just could not ask more from this series, and I enjoyed the entire thing, so I highly recommend this series to all of you guys. The next two things that I read were actually part of a manga duology, and these manga volumes were actually comprised of short stories, which is something that I've never read before in a manga. And anyways, those are volumes 1 and 2 of A Perfect Day for Love Letters. I had no idea what the series was about. I had never heard about it in my life. I just randomly saw it in my library's manga section, and I realized it was a duology, and my library had a volume, so I was like, why the heck not? But for both of these volumes, I really didn't think they were anything special. I thought they could have been way better than they actually were. And because there were 5 or 6 short stories per volume, I thought the biggest flaw was that each story really lacked the proper development. Also, they had a tendency to be maybe a little bit over dramatic or a little bit overly cheesy. So I gave the first volume 2.5 stars, and I gave the second volume 3.5 stars. And over the course of the month of August, I finished another series, which I'm pretty proud of myself for doing, and I read all 27 volumes of Fullmetal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. I do have a book review up for Fullmetal Alchemist, and that talks about more about what the series is all about and more of my thoughts on that, so I will link that below. So this was a great series, and I very highly recommend it as well. The next two things that I read were also manga bind-ups, and they were a complete duology, and that is the Doubt series, and this is by Yoshiki Tonogai. So this is a horror, slasher, mystery, thriller, suspense manga series. Essentially, it's about a group of characters who end up kidnapped and abandoned in this strange, creepy warehouse setting. And basically, one of the members of this group is a murderer, and the rest of them have to figure out who it is before they all end up dead. I will say that in this series, the suspense is much more satisfying than the reveal, but I think it's amazing, and I still haven't stopped thinking about it ever since I finished it. So like I said, I have a mashup manga review that I will link in the description, and that is for Fullmetal Alchemist and the Doubt duology, and I talk more about what they're about and go more into my thoughts, and these were both amazing series that I highly recommend. Very different from one another, but both very good. And after I finished with Doubt, I started the first volume of Yoshiki Tonogai's other series, which is called Judge. And in case you can tell by the cover, it is kind of closely related to Doubt in nature, in premise, if you will. And again, it's about a group of strangers who are kidnapped and essentially left for dead in an abandoned courthouse. And basically, all of these characters each represent one of these 7 deadly sins. So it's another suspenseful kind of death game, and they have to figure out what each other's sins are, and then they have to congregate and decide every hour who is the person that they're going to kill. And even though the premise is really similar to Doubt, this manga author has just caught my attention again. The suspense is through the roof, and I have to know what's gonna happen next. Volume 1 left off on a huge cliffhanger, and I really want to know what goes down next. I did end up giving the first volume 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I really want to continue with the series very soon. The next novel that I read was The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I don't want to give a synopsis for this book, and I don't want to talk about my thoughts about it because I did a pretty thorough review for it, and I will link that in the description. But I know this book is really hyped right now, and so many people love it, and so many people that I respect and that I trust like it, but I really didn't enjoy it, and I explain all of my reasons why, of course, in my review. And I ended up giving that one a 2 out of 5 stars. I don't even care. Also in August, I started another manga series, and I read the first 7 volumes of Oran High School Host Club by Bisco Hattori. This is a super ridiculous romantic comedy parody kind of story. And it's about this scholarship student named Haruhi who goes to this elite private high school called Oran, obviously. One day Haruhi is looking for a quiet place to study, and he sees what he thinks is an abandoned music room. But what he finds is actually the home of the Oran High School Host Club. This is a group of ridiculously attractive and just plain ridiculous guys, and they gather every single day after school basically just to make girls happy. They spend time with them, and they go on dates with them, and they whisper sweet nothings in their ears. It's pretty funny. So before Haruhi can flee from the host club, he accidentally knocks over this very expensive vase, and that puts him in debt with the host club. And in order to pay off that debt, he has to join the host club and gain a certain number of customers, that kind of thing. But surprise, surprise, Haruhi is not a he is a she. And then basically the series goes on from there with the shenanigans of the host club and them trying to keep Haruhi's girlish identity a secret. I marathoned through the entire anime season of Oran High School Host Club, and it was comedic gold. I enjoyed myself so much while I was watching that series. It's a super smart show that's hilarious and very aware of itself. So I think to enjoy this one, you just have to be ready for the ridiculousness. You just have to understand that there may not necessarily always be a point, except that it's fun and that it's hilarious. And then Bout of Books 11.0 happened, and I ended up reading 9 things over the course of that week. The first thing being The Bitter Kingdom by Ray Carson, like I already mentioned, and also the last 4 bind-ups of Fullmetal Alchemist, again, like I already said. And then I reread Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas in preparation for Heir of Fire. Duh. I also reread Lola and the Boy Next Door by Stephanie Perkins. And then after that, I did read Isla and the Happily Ever After, also by Stephanie Perkins. And then I ended my Bout of Books week with Grizz Grimley's Frankenstein, obviously the graphic novel inspired by Mary Shelley's original sci-fi novel. So if you want to hear more about the 9 books that I just mentioned, please feel free to head over to my Bout of Books 11.0 wrap-up if you have not done that already. And then the last book that I read in August was a buddy read, and that was Seizure Storm by Leigh Bardugo. As some of you may or may not recall, I buddy read Shadow and Bone in July with Penelope from Penelope's Picks. She is my soul sister. We are so attuned to one another's thoughts that if it weren't awesome, it would be frightening. And again, because this is a sequel, I don't want to say too much about it, but I will just say that it continues the main character, Alina's storyline, and talks more about her evolving power let's just leave it at that. And I have to say that I'm really missing the hype with this series. I really don't understand. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a very solid YA high fantasy series, and it does have a lot of good things going on for it, and I do like the themes that are running throughout it, and I really enjoy the conflicts that the main character has to face and work her way through. I just don't think it's written that well. And especially with this book, I felt like the pacing was entirely off. I felt like I was flipping a lot of pages and reading a lot of words, but nothing of import was really happening. I also have to say that I've found myself very disappointed with the world building in this series, and I think the fact that this fantasy world is inspired by Russia is a little bit gimmicky at this point. At the very front of each book, there's this huge map of the entire world, but I don't ever feel like the audience really gets a good feel for how vast the land is, and we don't really have a good understanding of the entire world besides a few specific places, and I feel like those places are so few that at this point they almost feel like sets, but I still think it was just okay, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So those were all of the things that I read in August, and definitely let me know what some of the highlights of your reading month in August were. I would love to hear. So anyways, that's it for me and this video. I really hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching. I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye.